The day the will was read, I felt like my whole life collapsed in one breath. Sawyer sat there smiling, pretending to be humble while the lawyer announced he was getting the mansion in New York. Everyone congratulated him, acting as if he earned it, while I was handed an old cabin in Alaska that looked like it would fall apart if the wind blew too hard. I tried to stay calm, but the humiliation sat like a stone in my chest. I didn't understand why my parents would do this to me, especially when I had been the one taking care of them in their final years. Sawyer barely visited, yet he was rewarded like some shining star. When I got home that night, Cameron didn't even try to comfort me. He tossed the ring across the table like it meant nothing and told me I was wasting his life. He said he couldn't build a future with someone who didn't come from anything. Hearing that from the man I loved hurt more than losing the house. I realized I had been surrounded by people who only valued me for what they thought I had to offer. By the time he walked out, I felt empty, but something inside me also broke free. I left for Alaska the next morning. The flight was long, and every hour that passed felt heavier. When I finally reached the cabin, it was worse than I expected. The porch sagged, the windows were cracked, and snow pushed against the door like it wanted in. But inside, under all the dust and cold air, something felt strange, like my parents had left me more than everyone believed. I kept searching until I noticed a loose floorboard under the old rug. When I pulled it up, a metal handle appeared. My hands shook as I lifted it and revealed a narrow ladder leading down into darkness. The cellar smelled old, untouched for years, but the moment my flashlight hit the shelves, I just froze. Stacks of gold bars covered the walls. Boxes filled with documents sat neatly labeled. I thought I was dreaming. In the corner was a sealed envelope with my name written in my mother's handwriting. I opened it slowly, my heart racing harder with every word. She explained everything, how the land and the assets were in my name because I was the only one they trusted to protect the family legacy. Sawyer had debts they kept hidden. The mansion was given to him because it looked valuable but was actually sinking in costs. I was the real heir, but they feared he would destroy everything if he knew. I sat there in that hidden room for a long time, trying to breathe. All the pain, all the shame, all the insults, they were built on lies. The broken cabin wasn't a punishment. It was a shield. And for the first time, I understood that my parents didn't abandon me. They believed in me so much that they hid $50 million under a collapsing roof just to keep it safe for me. When I woke up the next morning in the cold cabin, the shock of what I found still sat heavy in my chest. I carried the boxes of ledgers to the small table by the window and started going through them one by one. At first, I didn't understand most of the numbers. But the more I read, the clearer everything became. These weren't random records. They were detailed documents showing every investment my parents had made for decades. There were timber contracts from old forests, mineral rights from land no one ever talked about, and accounts holding money in places I didn't even know my parents had connections to. Every file had my name listed as the owner. Every signature pointed to a plan they never told anyone about. I kept waiting to see Sawyer's name, thinking maybe they split things in a different way. But page after page told the same story. Everything significant was tied to me. I didn't feel proud. I felt confused. It didn't make sense why they pretended Sawyer was the golden child while giving me the things that mattered most. For years, they made him look like the one who deserved everything. But now the truth was staring me straight in the face. They weren't favoring him. They were hiding him from the very responsibilities they gave me. As I dug deeper into the files, the pieces fell together. Mixed between the financial papers were notes written in my father's handwriting. Some mentioned debts. Others mentioned people Sawyer owed money to. There were warnings about his habits, reminders to check on him quietly, and letters from banks about late payments. I realized quickly this wasn't about love or favoritism. Sawyer had gotten himself tangled with people who didn't forgive easily. My parents must have spent years covering up his problems, hoping he would change. Giving him the mansion wasn't a reward. It was a way to keep him away from everything valuable, so he wouldn't ruin it. Seeing it written out so clearly made my chest tighten. All my life I thought they ignored me. I thought they overlooked everything I did and kept giving Sawyer more. But now I understood why the cabin was placed in my hands. It wasn't a joke or an insult. It was where they hid the truth from everyone, including him. They trusted me to be responsible even when I didn't know they were depending on me. I kept reading until the sun dipped behind the trees. The more I learned, the heavier the room felt. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about realizing my parents were trying to protect the family the only way they knew how. They couldn't stop Sawyer from making bad choices, but they could try to shield the future of everything they built. And somehow, without ever telling me, they decided I was the one who could handle it. When I finally closed the last ledger, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just money or land. It was responsibility. It was trust. It was the truth they never said aloud but left for me to uncover when the time was right. And now that I understood, I knew my life was never going to be the same again. When I finally flew back to New York, I made sure no one could guess what I had discovered. I kept my face tired, my voice soft, and my story simple. I let people assume the trip to Alaska had crushed me. It was easier that way. The less they suspected, the smoother everything would go. I didn't mention the ledgers, the gold, or the letters. I didn't even hint that anything had changed. I acted like someone trying to accept a life that suddenly felt small. Sawyer didn't waste a second showing off his new lifestyle. He talked about his mansion as if he had earned it through hard work instead of inheritance. He walked me through the halls like a tour guide, pointing out chandeliers, marble floors, and the space he planned to turn into a private bar. His grin made it clear he enjoyed thinking I had been left behind. I kept my reactions quiet, nodding politely while storing away every detail of how easily he believed the lie. Cameron appeared soon after. He acted surprised to see me, pretending he didn't know how badly he had hurt me. His voice softened, his eyes stayed on mine too long, and he used every excuse possible to keep a conversation going. He talked about mistakes and second chances, acting as though we had simply drifted apart instead of him throwing me aside. I didn't argue or push him away. I just let him talk. Letting him believe I was still vulnerable made everything easier. Behind that calm mask, I worked on a different world, one no one could see. Each morning, before anyone was awake, I met with lawyers who specialized in privacy. I sat with financial advisors who knew how to build companies without revealing the person behind them. Everything I set up used a new identity, a clean one without any family connection. I moved carefully, making sure no trail led back to Alaska or the documents left by my parents. Every signature, every meeting, every file was handled quietly and professionally. I focused on creating something solid enough to support the inheritance once I activated it. I didn't rush. I wanted everything to be ready before anyone could interfere. My parents had managed their wealth in secret for years. Now I was continuing that plan with the same caution. Setting up accounts, registering businesses, arranging trusts. Each step made me feel more in control. It wasn't about getting back at anyone yet. It was about building a foundation so strong that nothing Sawyer or Cameron did could break it. During the evenings, I acted like the same woman they expected. I kept my clothes simple, my mood steady, and my conversations short. I let Sawyer believe he was above me. I let Cameron think he had a chance to work his way back into my life. Their assumptions kept them distracted while I moved forward. With every quiet step I took, the distance between their opinions and my reality grew wider. They thought I was struggling. They thought they still had power over me. But the truth was, I was creating a life far larger than either of them could imagine. One built on the trust my parents had placed in me and the knowledge only I now held. I was keeping my distance from Sawyer, but he showed up one afternoon acting strangely polite. He didn't brag about anything this time. Instead, he asked if we could talk alone. The moment he closed the door behind us, I knew something was off. He wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind he used when he wanted something. He started by asking how I'd been, pretending to care, pretending to be a supportive brother. I let him speak without interrupting, waiting for the real reason he came. It didn't take long. He brought up the Alaskan cabin, calling it a lot of work and too much responsibility for someone already under stress. His voice stayed light at first, but it was clear he wasn't concerned about my well-being. He kept hinting that the place held more potential than people thought. Then he finally said what he actually wanted. He asked if I would sign the property over to him. He said it would bring the family closer, if everything stayed in one set of hands, his hands. Hearing him talk like that made something cold settle inside me. I asked him why he suddenly wanted the land. That's when he slipped. He mentioned information he came across, something about resources in the ground. He avoided details, but his face gave him away. Someone had told him the land wasn't worthless. Someone had told him enough for him to chase it like a prize. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if we were partners in some secret deal. He said he could take care of everything, if I just trusted him. His tone was smooth, almost rehearsed. But I already knew his version of help only benefited him. When I told him no, the shift was instant. The friendly mask dropped. His smile tightened, and his posture stiffened. He asked again, this time without pretending. When I refused a second time, he stopped hiding his frustration. He said I was being ungrateful. He said the land was wasted on me. He even suggested I was causing problems by holding on to something I didn't deserve. I stayed calm, but inside I felt a mix of anger and sadness. Not because of his words, but because I finally saw him clearly. All those years of believing he was simply favored, I missed how deeply his entitlement ran. He didn't care about unity. He cared about advantage. And now that he thought the land held value, he wanted to take it from me without hesitation. Before he left, he tried one last approach, threatening without saying the exact words. He implied that holding onto the property could lead to trouble. He looked at me the way someone looks at an obstacle they plan to remove. After he walked out, I sat in silence, letting the truth settle. My parents hadn't been blind. They weren't cold or unfair. They saw sides of Sawyer that I never wanted to believe existed. They weren't giving him more. They were protecting everything from him. And now, for the first time, I understood exactly why they trusted me instead. Cameron showed up again, just when things with Sawyer had started turning tense. It was almost strange how perfectly timed his return was. He acted like he missed me terribly, speaking softly and trying to look sincere. He brought flowers, talked about memories, and behaved as if the breakup had never happened. Anyone watching from the outside might have thought he was genuinely trying to fix things. But I noticed the details he hoped I wouldn't catch. The forced smile, the way he kept circling back to the Alaska property, the sudden interest in my daily plans. He asked questions that had nothing to do with us and everything to do with what I owned. He wanted to know if I planned to fix the place up, if I had looked into selling, and how much land came with the cabin. He tried to sound casual, but he kept pushing the conversation back to the same topic. It didn't take long before I understood what he was doing. Cameron never cared about anything unless it benefited him. His sudden concern made it obvious he had learned something about the property. Once I realized that, I paid closer attention. He slipped up more than he realized. He mentioned things I never told him, things only someone who had talked to Sawyer would know. At first it was small comments, like knowing the exact size of the land. Then he started hinting at opportunities, and how smart people knew when to take action. The way he spoke sounded too similar to Sawyer's tone for it to be a coincidence. That's when it all clicked. He wasn't working alone. He and Sawyer had somehow teamed up, probably hoping to get me to hand over the land before I figured out anything important. Cameron must have thought he could charm his way back into my life and earn my trust, while Sawyer tried the direct approach. Together, they assumed I would break under pressure or fall for old feelings. Instead of reacting, I let them believe their plans were working. I started being more careful. When Cameron visited, I kept my phone nearby and recorded the conversations whenever he let something slip. I didn't push him away or confront him. I stayed quiet, acted uncertain, and let him talk. The more relaxed he felt, the more he exposed. He admitted he had talked to Sawyer. He bragged about how big decisions were coming. He hinted at plans they had already made without me. Every word he said gave me another piece of the truth. Meanwhile, I kept my expression calm. I didn't show fear, anger, or suspicion. I listened the way someone listens when they're too confused to push back. Cameron believed that act completely. He thought I was drifting back toward him, still unsure of myself. He didn't realize I was memorizing everything he said. I didn't react because I wanted the whole picture before taking any steps. Seeing how easily he switched sides made it clear I needed more than instinct. I needed proof. And the more I gathered, the more I understood just how far they were willing to go. They saw me as someone they could fool. But they forgot something important. I wasn't the one acting anymore. I was watching, and every lie they told only made me stronger. I moved quietly, the same way I had since returning from Alaska, but now I wasn't just staying hidden. I was taking action. I knew I had to secure everything my parents left behind before Sawyer or Cameron could interfere. The first thing I did was expand the area around the cabin. I bought the nearby plots of land using my new business identity, keeping my real name out of every document. No one questioned the purchases because they were handled professionally through lawyers who understood privacy. With each piece of land I obtained, the foundation of my future grew stronger. After that, I brought in experts who could study the area without attracting attention. A small team of geologists arrived under the excuse of routine land assessment. They inspected the soil, tested samples, and explained the potential hidden beneath the surface. Their reports confirmed what my parents must have known years ago. The property held far more value than anyone imagined. I didn't share the information with anyone. I simply filed the reports away, building the groundwork for something larger. I also reached out to legal specialists who handled corporate structures and asset protection. They guided me through setting up companies, trusts, and agreements that would make it impossible for anyone to touch what was mine. Every step was organized, documented, and protected by strict contracts. I wasn't just following my parents' plan. I was expanding it. I created systems they never had the chance to finish, making sure everything connected to the land stayed locked behind layers of law and strategy. While I was building all of this, news about Sawyer slowly reached me. He tried to hide it, but the signs were everywhere. His mansion needed repairs he couldn't afford. People he owed money to started calling the house. He began selling things inside the mansion, pretending it was decluttering. But everyone could see he was scrambling. He had counted on getting the Alaskan land, and when that didn't happen, the pressure around him grew heavier each day. His desperation didn't make me feel angry or victorious. It just made me more aware of how dangerous he could become if he felt cornered. I worked even harder to seal every part of my inheritance. I updated contracts, reviewed security plans, and made sure my companies could stand independently without exposing my involvement. The legal teams helped create a wall that no one, not Sawyer, not Cameron, not their associates, could get past. I wasn't preparing for revenge. I was preparing for protection. I needed everything to be solid before they made another move. Every document I signed, every lawyer I hired, every survey report I collected added another safeguard around the legacy my parents trusted me with. What I was building wasn't just a business. It was a shield. As Sawyer's world continued to shake, mine grew steadier. I could feel the shift happening quietly, piece by piece. I wasn't the broken sister he thought I was. I wasn't the abandoned fiancé Cameron expected to manipulate. I was someone finally stepping into a role that had been waiting for me all along. The night everything finally broke open started with an invitation that felt harmless on the surface. Sawyer suggested a small family dinner, something simple, something peaceful. I already sensed the real reason, but I went anyway. I needed to see how far they were willing to push. When I arrived, both of them were already seated, acting unusually cheerful. Cameron greeted me like we were old friends, and Sawyer kept his smile glued in place, but the tension underneath was impossible to miss. They started with small talk, but it didn't last long. Sawyer shifted the conversation toward responsibility and doing what's best for the family. Cameron added comments that sounded supportive on the surface, but carried a clear message underneath. They kept circling around the same topic: my rights, my decisions, my choices, without saying the exact words at first. When they realized I wasn't taking the bait, they stopped pretending. The polite tone vanished. Sawyer leaned forward and asked directly if I planned to keep holding on to something too big for me. He said I was creating problems by refusing to cooperate. Cameron joined in, pretending to act as a peacemaker, but every sentence pushed me toward the answer they wanted. They talked over me, made exaggerated sighs, and tried to make me feel unreasonable for staying silent. It wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a corner they were trying to trap me in. Cameron took it a step further. He said he had been thinking about our past and how things could have been different if I made smarter choices. Then he slipped, and his real feelings came out. He admitted he proposed because he assumed I would never rise above Sawyer's shadow. He expected me to stay predictable and easy to guide. He said it plainly, almost proudly, as if the confession didn't reveal exactly who he was. For a moment, both men waited for a reaction. They expected anger, tears, or maybe fear. They wanted me shaken. They needed me to feel small. Instead, I just watched them. The room felt strangely quiet to me, even though they kept talking. Their voices blended into a dull noise, words losing meaning. Everything they tried to use against me only reminded me of how far I had come without them realizing. They kept pushing, raising their voices, accusing me of being selfish. They tried guilt, pressure, and insults, switching tactics every few minutes. But nothing reached me. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain anything. I simply stood up from the table when I was done listening. Sawyer demanded to know where I was going. Cameron tried to block my path with soft words and forced regret. Neither of them understood that the moment they revealed their real intentions, they handed me all the proof I needed. I didn't have to warn them or respond. I didn't owe them a single explanation. I walked out calmly, my heartbeat steady. Their voices followed me, sharp and angry, but they no longer had any weight. I wasn't leaving because I was hurt. I was leaving because I finally saw everything clearly. And for the first time, they had no power over me at all. Sawyer always believed he could control every situation, but the moment I gathered enough proof, everything shifted. I didn't rush. I didn't argue. I simply organized every file, message, and recording that showed how he had tried to trap me financially and emotionally. For a long time, I didn't know what to do with everything I had collected, but once I realized how deep his lies went, the choice became easy. I sent everything to the right people quietly, without warning him or anyone connected to him. The first hit came when the banks received those documents. His mansion, the one he bragged about constantly, was frozen in a single afternoon. He didn't even know why at first. He tried to call his contacts, but no one picked up. They already knew what the investigation meant for them, and they wanted distance. The money he once used to intimidate others suddenly became untouchable, and the people he used to impress now avoided him completely. Investigators moved fast once they saw the files linking him to illegal deals. His partners started scrambling, each one trying to protect themselves. They had no loyalty to him. Some even turned in extra evidence to reduce their own trouble. Sawyer kept pretending he had everything under control, but every hour brought more pressure. His phone, which used to never stop ringing, became silent. No support. No allies. Just consequences. Cameron was next. He thought his position would shield him forever, but the recordings showing his cooperation with Sawyer's plans were clear. I sent the evidence anonymously to his company. Within days, he was escorted out of his office. His security badge didn't even work when he tried to enter the building again. He tried to convince people that he'd been framed, but the proof spoke louder than he ever could. His reputation fell apart so quickly that even his closest colleagues refused to meet him for coffee. The best part was that none of this required any dramatic confrontation. I didn't need to shout or beg anyone to believe me. I didn't need to face either of them again. My silence did more damage than any fight ever could. Every step of their downfall came from the truth they thought I would never dare to reveal. Watching their lives collapse wasn't about revenge for me. It was about ending the fear they tried to create around me. Sawyer kept trying to contact people who once admired him, but the moment they heard his name, they hung up. Cameron attempted to start fresh somewhere else, but every company he applied to knew about the investigation. Their confidence disappeared. Their power shrank. Their arrogance cracked. They were left standing in the ruins they built with their own hands. I didn't celebrate, but I did feel a quiet sense of freedom. I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves the moment they chose lies, pressure, and greed over decency. All I did was remove the cover they hid behind. After that, everything fell exactly where it was supposed to. When I finally returned to the cabin, the air felt different. The place that once looked small and forgotten now seemed like a blank page waiting for something new. I walked through each room slowly, noticing the cracks in the walls, the uneven floors, and the old furniture covered in dust. Instead of feeling discouraged, I felt calm. This cabin was the only thing in my life that had never demanded anything from me. It was mine in a way nothing else had ever been. I started planning the renovation the same day I arrived. I brought in workers from the nearest town, and together we rebuilt the place piece by piece. We added new windows that opened toward the mountains, warm lighting, and a kitchen that finally felt welcoming. I kept some parts of the old structure because it reminded me of my parents' hands, their habits, their quiet way of living. The mix of old and new made the entire cabin feel like a fresh beginning. One afternoon, while clearing out a narrow storage space I had never touched before, I noticed a loose wooden board. When I pulled it away, I found a small metal box covered in dust. Inside, there was a folded letter sealed with my mother's handwriting. My breath caught for a moment. I sat on the floor before opening it, needing a second to steady myself. The letter was simple but deep. My mother wrote that the cabin had always been meant for me, even before she passed. She said they knew I carried a quiet strength that didn't show on the outside. She explained they believed I would understand the land, protect it, and turn it into something meaningful. They trusted that I would choose a path that came from my own heart, not from pressure or expectations. Reading those words made something heavy inside me loosen. I didn't cry out of sadness. It felt more like letting go of a tight knot I had carried for years. After finishing the renovations, the cabin looked nothing like the place I first walked into. It became a peaceful retreat surrounded by tall trees, soft snow, and endless quiet. I decided it was time to start something new, something that felt like mine. I filed the paperwork for my company and chose to build its main office right there on the land my parents left. It felt right to begin my future in the same place their hopes for me rested. Each morning, I stepped outside and looked at the mountains, feeling the kind of peace I had never known in the city. The cabin no longer represented loneliness or abandonment. It felt like a doorway to a different life, one based on strength, purpose, and calm. The letter stayed in my desk drawer, not because I needed to read it again, but because knowing it existed was enough. It reminded me that my parents' faith in me was quiet but steady. Starting my business from that piece of land wasn't just a choice. It was a promise, to them and to myself, that everything they believed I could become was finally taking shape. I heard the knock on the door long before I got up. When I finally opened it, I saw Sawyer and Cameron standing there, broken and desperate. Their clothes were worn, their eyes tired, and the confidence they once had completely gone. I could see the fear and shame in their faces. They didn't speak at first, they just stared at me, waiting for some reaction, some sign that I might still be the same person they once thought they could control. Sawyer finally stepped forward, his voice low and pleading. He talked about mistakes, about family, and about wanting another chance. Cameron stood behind him, nodding, trying to appear sincere, though I could see the worry in his eyes. They rambled about losing everything, doors closing, and how people had turned against them. They tried to make it sound like they had changed, like they finally understood me and the consequences of their actions. I didn't move. I didn't feel anger or hurt, only calm. Their words didn't reach me the way they once would have. I felt no need to respond, no need to justify myself or explain all the ways they had tried to manipulate me. I let them talk, hoping they would realize on their own that their old tactics didn't work anymore. I could see Sawyer glancing at Cameron, unsure, realizing that nothing would convince me. When they finally paused, Sawyer reached out as if expecting me to step forward, to soften, to give in. Cameron whispered my name, trying to stir something in me. But I didn't move. I didn't offer comfort or forgiveness. I simply said, "I'm done." My voice was calm, steady, and final. I didn't yell, I didn't lecture, I didn't make threats. That simple statement carried everything they needed to hear. I turned and walked back inside, closing the door behind me. The sound of the lock clicking into place was satisfying, not out of anger, but because it meant I was finally free. Outside, the wind swirled around them as they stood in silence. Inside, I breathed deeply, feeling the weight of years lift from my shoulders. From that moment on, I focused entirely on building my life. I turned the land my parents left me into the center of a thriving business. I hired the right people, made careful decisions, and shaped a future that reflected my vision, not anyone else's expectations. Every success came from my choices and the trust my parents placed in me. I didn't rise to show Sawyer or Cameron anything. I rose because I finally had the space to become the person I was meant to be. Watching them fade into the distance, unable to touch my life, brought a quiet satisfaction I had never felt before. My greatest revenge wasn't taking them down. It was living fully, building a life they could never reach, a life I owned completely. Do you think I made the right choice by shutting the door on Sawyer and Cameron, or should I have given them another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.